What's going on, builders? Welcome to Software Sundays. On this show, our mission is to inform, educate, and to start discussions around technology and the types of transformations that it'll have inside of our community. If this is your first time, welcome. It's good to see you. If you've been rocking with us for a minute, thank you for returning. Welcome back. Uh, let's talk a few announcements real quick before we really get started. One, happy birthday, Aaron. Uh, my God, you getting old. So hope you feeling great. It's good to see you getting old. Happy 35th birthday. I hope you're feeling amazing. Also, happy birthday to baby Bray, uh, Lynette, and Rob. You know, good luck. I know my boy is the wild child in the house, but I would love to see the traits, or would love to hear about some of the traits that you feel that he's developing over time that really came from y'all, and the ones that he just found on his own. So happy birthday to him. I was corrected last week when I said it was still Capricorn season. So my apologies to the Aquarius out there. It is Aquarius season. So, go Aqua folks. Well, word. Just a quick little disclaimer because I realized I've been talking about topics that many people may not understand very well right now. And I want to make it clear that although I am a professional in the software engineering industry or as a software engineer, and I have a lot of experience in different companies and different roles, helping with their engineering and IT teams. I want to say that we highlight different topics here that may or may not be helpful to your specific business, but I am not your advisor. If you would like professional advice to help you make a decision based on your specific case, definitely talk to a professional advisor who can provide you some advice on business, legal, or tax questions that you may have. The opinions and views stated here are only my own. They do not reflect or necessarily reflect the views of Build, Learn, Impact Corporation or the Community Works LLC and their affiliates. So just wanted to clear the air and get that out there. And with that, we can get started. So there's a few interesting things going on in the world with tech. First, I'm going to just highlight that the Y Combinator, which you may or may not be familiar with, Y Combinator is a like an accelerator. They provide investment dollars to startups, but also provide like mentorship in a community for founders and startups to kind of grow and develop in. And they're super popular in the US and based out of Silicon Valley. They have recently, very quietly, decided that they're no longer going to be funding and investing inside of Canadian companies, which is super interesting because that is like another nail in the coffin for the Canadian tech ecosystem. Right now, there have been, or I'll say, companies like Slack that originated in Canada, and some others that may have initially been started there and were operating there, have decided to shift their teams and their organization into the U.S. And that could be for a number of regulatory reasons or other reasons, but the main driver that it seems to be stemming from is the fact that the money is just not there and the talent is just not there. The places in the US like Silicon Valley and even Austin, Texas, and New York, that's where a lot of the talent, technical talent, and people that are really driven to build great things, that's where they're kind of pooling and finding themselves. If you're building a company out in Canada and you're looking to really make it change the world, you may not have access to the right funding and capital that you'll need to really take and propel yourself and your business where it needs to go. And so this is like a really clear signal to everyone that's building a startup that if you really want to be serious, you have to move one to the US, but you have to be inside of Silicon Valley. That's like the I wouldn't say that's unspoken. It's almost clear that that's where a lot of the developments and advancements are kind of coming from. So keep that in mind if you're looking to be growing your business and starting your business. I'm assuming most of my audience is in the US right now, but if you're not, just keep that in mind. That's kind of where the funding is going to feel comfortable being deployed. They may not be, Y Combinator specifically does also say in their terms that they'll invest in companies registered in the US, Cayman Islands, and Singapore. So if you're registered in any of those countries, you're still good to go. But it's just something to keep in mind for when you're thinking long term. If you're just trying to start your business and you're based and you live in New Jersey or you live in Toronto, that may not the place where you live may not be the best place for you to actually decide to plant the flag of your business. So you have to keep that in mind and just follow where the money and where the talent and where just the leadership is going and where they're shifting and flowing. Um, I was g- I was gonna skip into the cyber attacks on the rise, but we're gonna just skip real quick to another kind of signal for me and everyone else about the just the state of the tech industry and kind of the playing field that we're operating in. So in 2025, Andreessen Horowitz, or I always say that name wrong, Horowitz, or A16Z, raised $15 billion to deploy as capital. A16Z, again, if you're not familiar with, is a venture capital firm that has funded companies like um or thinking they funded I don't have the list right now. I gotta come up with that list. Uh but they funded most companies. Think even last week I was talking about for Anthropic. They've provided some investments there, but basically they're one of the big wigs inside of the venture capital space, and they have raised nearly 15% of all VC capital raised in the US. And that means that they have a significant opinion and voice on how that capital is going to be deployed and which companies are going to have the opportunity to really develop and last over the long term. This, along with the original story about YC Combinator, is more proving the fact that the capital is out here. Most VC funding is actually done inside of the US. I think over two-thirds of that funding, which is like $500 billion, over maybe per year. I think last year was about $500 billion. But there's a significant amount of money being raised. Most of it is coming from the US and being raised in the US. And this company, this venture capital firm, A16Z, has a fifth of it. So they're going to be able to decide who is going to be the winner when the next technological shift happens. So I'm not saying you gotta get out on a lay down, but I'm gonna say if you really want to make it as a startup founder and you want to even just have some success inside of the startup and big tech space, you gotta at least be familiar with the decision makers at that top level. These are the people that if you could connect with them, you would get the access to the funding that you need. You could get access to the talent and the teams and the just mental uh mind share that you need, and they could help with distribution. They could just put you in the right rooms. And even speaking on that, I think it's interesting. They do have a cultural leadership fund where they have been more intentional with allocating some of those resources into historically marginalized communities like our own. But it's going to, it's just making me think that for there to be real equity, and especially in the VC space, I think black founders get like 1% of the total funding. Maybe I don't even think we get a full 1% of the total investment and capital available. But for there to be some real differences and equity and opportunity for us to take advantage of, we have to start connecting with these groups. They have access to partners and opportunities that would really make or break your business. So if you're in the Silicon Valley, see if there's an event going on hosted by A16Z. If you're anywhere else and there's an event coming by, or there's someone who is either a general partner or someone that has even worked with that firm, try to build relationships in that direction, because you want to have all of the chips in place possible, as many as possible, to give your startup and your company a winning shot. If we're talking about $15 billion worth of just winning shots, that's capital is going to be deployed. So hopefully it can be deployed into communities that actually benefit everyone and not kind of get pulled and centralized into the areas and the groups that kind of already had access to it. So that's something I'm going to be keeping in mind and monitoring over the next year and going on. They're looking to invest in companies in biotech, defense and cybersecurity, physical AI, and even vertical AI. So if you're building a company inside of any of those spaces, definitely check it out. See if there are some events you can go to, if you can apply to get some of that funding. But definitely stay aware of the power players in that space, in the technology venture capital space, because they could make things easier for you, or if they were to start funding your competitor, make it significantly harder for you to actually get your business off the ground. So keep that in mind. And so also on some to some cyber news. Cyber attacks are on the rise. I mentioned it a few weeks ago with Anthropic on catching a attack that was in progress, like almost a fully automated attack that was being uh, conducted using Claude. Excuse me. But they were able to identify an attack that most of the levels where you would do some type of initial scanning, if you're doing the initial uh, access escalation, and these different steps that kind of make up an attack, a cyber attacker or some type of bad actor could conduct, these were all being conducted with AI. And that makes it more possible and just much easier for these attacks to become more spread, because it first lowers the barrier of entry to someone that just wants to become a cyber criminal, but it also gives those existing cyber criminals more access and more resources to now be able to facilitate just more widespread attacks. Whereas if it took one operator, one attacker a day to go through the full pipeline of attacking a company, now they could send AI or their AI tools and systems to actually go through the attack. And they could attack, instead of one a day, they can now hit 10 different companies. So these attacks are becoming more common. they're becoming more disruptive, and it's going to be something that every founder building software or building some type of solution is going to keep in mind, whether it's a software only product, or especially if you're dealing with some type of physical hardware with that can also be uh, attacked. Because now, if the data used to be kept centralized in the cloud or on prem, that was one place that had to get attacked, and you could kind of layer your defenses there to avoid the worst of the breaches. Now, if you're having that same or extensions of that technology being deployed to the edge, being deployed close to where your customer lives, think autonomous vehicles, think IoT devices like these smart bed. If those new products are deployed somewhere that doesn't have the same protection as your enterprise environment, you're going to have to rethink your cybersecurity strategy, because it's not just enough to secure the software in the central location. You have to think about what types of threats are going to kind of hit your customer wherever they are. So please, I beg of you, whoever you are that is building your new CRM or your new app or social media app, whatever it is that you're building, please do not think about cybersecurity and privacy later. It is not something that you can just skip through. It is not something that you want to kind of build around without thinking about how you're going to protect that data, who's going to need access to it, and even how you're going to back it up over the long term. Because a ransomware attack that knocks or makes your system unavailable is just as expensive as a attack that pulls out the data and results in the actual breach. The if they make it so you can't even serve your customers anymore, or there's no longer any data available to serve your customers, your entire business could be impacted. Not only just reputational harm, the financial consequences, but again, your business operationally, you just may not be able to do the thing that you are serving and providing to your customers. So please do not think about security later. You got to think about it today whenever you're building the product, and keep that in mind, especially when you're getting to handling payments or you're handling some type of sensitive data. It doesn't have to be necessarily like a social security number or even payment information. It could be something as simple as a username or a user email or an address. Like these fields, these data types, not even data type, but that data is still important to someone. And there are some rules that you have to follow when you're processing and storing that data, whether it's related to regulatory like uh, rules and compliance laws like GDPR, or even just PCI laws. It's just you're holding a piece of your customer's life inside of that data. That data is valuable to somebody. Please be mindful about how you're processing it, and work with people who understand the space. Work with people that understand cybersecurity, that understand how to harden an infrastructure. Make sure that you're not just choosing to let all connections occur because that's how your app works. Yes, sometimes the least secure solution actually allows you to move faster inside of your product development, but making those decisions are usually going to bite you in the behind later on. I think this podcast and this channel got to be kid friendly, so I got to watch my language. But be careful with how you're setting things up from the start. Have someone on your team that understands how to incorporate maybe some standards from CIS. They provide like pages worth of configuration examples that you can use to say, this is how I know my application is secure. These are the resources and services that my app uses, and I have locked them down in this way. And keep in mind, sometimes you may not be able to, or you sometimes for your business operation, it may not be best to actually get the most secure configuration on your services, but you at least need to be aware of when you're making that exception. I have a public S3 bucket that I am exposing inside of my infrastructure. That S3 bucket is only used to store our public web pages. It does not store any type of user data. It does not store any type of internal applications. Everything inside of that bucket is okay to store publicly. Now, if I wanted to create a bucket that would be used to store user images and to store maybe other files that belong to my clients or my customers, then I would not use that bucket anymore. I wouldn't need to reconfigure it to be secure because that would break the existing functionality. I would just create a new bucket that has the right layer and right level of security that I need. So you got to have people on your team that understand these things and can help walk you through it. I didn't mention it last week, but I don't even know if I should be mentioning it right now. But if you're familiar with FTX and the scandal, big scam that happened with Sam Bankman Fried and his team, I think back in 2022, they lost $37 billion. I say lost. They, according or allegedly, they may or they definitely got charged with it and convicted of definitely doing some fraud. If got convicted of doing fraud, uh, one of the people involved was Sam Bankman Fried's girlfriend, who was leading the nonprofit arm that they were kind of working with and that was involved in it somehow. But her company, the one that she led, had siphoned at least $11 billion from the depositors inside of FTX. 11 billion that she and her company had to forfeit. She has recently been let out of prison. I think she did between 14 and 24 months for the crimes that she was convicted of. I think that was just interesting. I just wanted to share that. I know we talk about uh, big tech and technology, but okay, the point of me adding that is they were actually doing real fraud. So that's different than someone just making a mistake. But I want you to understand that when we're talking about real people and real users on your platform, whether you're dealing with private information or finances, there are consequences to you messing up. If you make a mistake with $37 billion, whether you were aware of it or not, you are going to have to face some type of consequences for that. And they can be extremely severe. If you are providing financial services through your platform and you have not locked down the platform that you are building and you have chosen to neglect the fact that you need to have some type of security and privacy in place, anything that comes from that is your responsibility. Please don't get caught up in no nonsense because you did not want to take the time to just do your due diligence and make sure that you were setting things up appropriately in the way that they needed to be set up. So I just wanted to share that. Don't don't find yourself moving so fast that you gotta go get locked up now. Please, please. We need you out here building things that people need, alright? So just keep that in mind. And we're gonna shift it over to the questions for this week. Thank you, Auntie, for providing the voice for this week. And let's get it.
Can I increase my value to my team as quickly as possible?
So you'll need to spend some time observing the team and just finding out more about what they do and how they do it. When you first join the team, or even before you start in the team that you're finding yourself in today, they could have told you, "Hey, these were the priorities, and these are questions that you should be asking when you're interviewing." But they've told you what the priority was. And when you joined the team, you should spend some time just seeing where they are. How does the current how does the current scenario and the current team structure, or the current technology and current processes, how do those differ from the priorities and the goals and the objectives that were shared with you before you started, and even now as you're starting to learn more about the company that you joined? When you've learned enough about what's going on and where they want to be, then you can start to say, hey, these are the things that I recommend that we do. Uh, that's where you can find the most value in your team, or that's how you can be of the most value to your team. Because now that you understand the goal and you understand where you guys are at, you can figure out how to come up with a plan. The plan could be adding some type of new system. It could be taking on some responsibility that someone else is currently leading and owning, so that they have more freedom and more opportunity to work on something else that you may or may not be capable of supporting. But that's going to be how you find out what the team values. And that's where you need to align your efforts from the day one to day, however many days you and years you decide to stay in that company. The value that the business has, or the core functionality of the business, and even more specifically the niche department or uh, team that you're working on, they're going to tell you what's important. Now all you have to do is combine what they said was important and your unique point of view, your unique experiences, to see how can I jump in to create more of the thing that we all value. If your team values speed, figure out how to automate something on your team, whether it's automating deployments. If they don't have CI/CD pipelines in place, figure out how you can set up a consistent and reliable pipeline to take deployments from 3 hours to 30 minutes. You can automate that. If your team is really struggling to keep track of changes that are happening, either from a regulatory audit standpoint or just a development documentation standpoint, figure out where you should be documenting the information and what structure they may need. Do they need diagrams? Do they need just run maps? Figure out what it's going to be and start creating those. That's going to be super helpful, and it's going to help propel the team. The most valuable thing you can do on a team is actually support the team and make them better. So focus on that. Focus on doing what you can to make the team better, however that is.
Is responsible for maintaining data privacy in an application.
I would like to say it's everyone's responsibility to ensure the security and privacy of the services that they rely on. But legally, if you and your team own or have access to some type of user's data, and you are you are providing a service for them, you are wholly responsible for making sure that the security of your application is maintained. You have to maintain that while being aware that the people, the users of that application, may be the weak links, and you still are responsible for anything that goes wrong with that data. So you have to have policies in place to make sure you are effectively securing that data, whether that is enabling MFA or enabling timeouts on your services so that uh, s- confidential information is not being leaked. And that could be at, like I said, the product level where you're talking about the actual user interface, but it could also be at the data level where you're deciding how and what tools will I use to either encrypt the data or to ensure access control to that data. It's your responsibility. And if you're working in a large team, it becomes everyone's shared responsibility because everyone is going to have a different lever that they can either push or pull to ensure the security of the app. If we think about the like a full stack application that is running on some Kubernetes infrastructure, or that's like the platform that this application runs on, and the application itself is uh, connecting to different external services. It has some API keys that it needs access to that allow it to connect to Stripe to make payments or Gmail to read and access um, some private data for a user. The application needs to make sure that they're not logging any types of uh, confidential data. You should not be logging the keys that your app is using. You should not be allowing all connections to your API. Um, you should be using a database, or this might be more of an infrastructure thing, but you should be using a database that has the right level of access control. And when you talk to your identity and access management team, you make sure that they understand the exact scope of data that you need access to. You should not be requesting access to everything. You should be requesting access to the specific areas of the business that you need access to. So that's from the application side. From the infrastructure side, you need to make sure that you are creating uh, systems for the application teams to use to make sure that they are building on a secure and reliable system. That means that you are providing uh, DDoS protection. So you have some type of firewall in place to make sure that any types of bad actors that are, you know, sending less than authentic requests to your application, that those are getting blocked, whether by IP or just by behavior. You're able to track that. You need to make sure whenever possible or if it aligns with your business that you are encrypting data. And that could be disk level encryption, where you're using the same key for everyone's data, or in some instances, you may need to have column and row level encryption, where everyone's data is encrypted separately. And that decision can be made at the infrastructure level. And it requires some conversations from the business teams, the application teams, and your infrastructure team to really decide and align on where that encryption and data privacy needs to live. It could mean making sure that the Docker containers that your applications run on are not having root level access. It could mean making sure that the Kubernetes clusters and pods that you use are using RBAC and role based access control and not just letting any pod talk to any pod. These type of configurations are infrastructure specific, but they all have a impact on the security of your application. These are things that you have to keep in mind. And again, they're everyone's responsibility. So figure out where you need to divide and conquer and don't make won't say don't make any mistakes, but be very careful not to make any mistakes. It can be very expensive.
When did artificial intelligence first develop?
So I know a lot of people are familiar with AI today, generative AI, and how that came about was this new technology called transformers that allowed um allowed you to train AI models faster, and it relied on having access to big data that could be processed by these training models. And that's how we got generative AI and even generative like for text and visual content. But before Gen AI existed, there was a thing called machine learning. And machine learning was the technology that enabled someone to decide whether a transaction was fraud or not. It allowed teams to decide how much was this property going to be worth. That's how Zillow became what they are. They were providing estimates that were using machine learning to actually predict more accurately the value of real estate. Banks have been using machine learning to stop fraud for years. Um, there are billions, if not trillions, of transactions happening a year. No one person is going to be able to decide whether or not something is fraud. A lot of those automated fraud detection systems were built with the original machine learning systems. Uh, IBM, they had Watson in the 2010s. And even before that, the concept of AI and neural networks existed, but not from like the 60s or the 50s. The technology is old, or at least the strategy, the concepts behind the technology is very old. It just so happens that in the 2020s and 2010s, we just had access to the compute necessary to make the technology work, right? We had access to the cloud where you could have distributed computers that are all working on the same problems. We had access to more data. You had access to better chips like GPUs that allowed you to process data for training much faster. These advancements made the current era of AI more possible and easier to actually do long term. But AI is not new. I actually saw, and I have to look more into it, but it was saying that the father of AI, or someone who was and important in developing the initial technologies, was a black man. I gotta look into it, and I'll probably share that. Oh, it is Black History Month, so happy Black History Month, everyone! Also, I just thought about that. That's crazy. But I'm gonna be sharing that information also. So keep an eye out for that and see what types of hands have we had in developing technology the way it is today. There, and not I'm 100% sure that we provided a lot of breakthroughs in the industry. I just want to give y'all a comprehensive list so you know exactly what and how we put on to get us where we are. Um, and I just want to inspire y'all to keep doing it because that creativity is in us. It's in us for real. But let's continue to build, continue to take steps forward in the right direction. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna definitely share that over the next few days.
How far can I scale and build an application using AWS?
So AWS is my longtime friend. I'll be honest. I have been using AWS um for at least 4 years. At least 4 years now. Um Honestly, the first cloud solution I used was GCP. But for AWS, I've been using it to keep track of my logs for my application. I use it as my compute infrastructure. So I'm using Lambda right now to host my APIs. I'm using S3 buckets to host my web app. So my UI, my single page application. I'm using that there. I'm using kind of indirectly. I'm using AWS to host and manage my database. I'm actually directly using uh, MongoDB Atlas, but they're building my tech or they're building my database on top of AWS resources. Uh, I'm using AWS Cognito as my identity pool to make sure that I'm able to provide MFA to my users, that I'm able to sign in new users and log in existing users. I'm using Amazon SES to send emails to my users and my customers or my customers' customers whenever they make a transaction or they start any type of service inside of our application. Um, what else am I using with AWS? Mm, I not for ToePro, but for Garage Assist, I'm using AWS SQS, SQS, and uh, platform application. I'm running a platform application with pretty sure it's SQS or SMS. Excuse me, SMS. I'm making that up. It's not SMS, but I'm using AWS right now to send push notifications to my users of my iOS app. So that's another uh, service that they provide, and they provide VMs from EC2. They provide databases. If you wanted to just really host directly through AWS, you could use AWS RDS, and they have like Aurora databases. They have a MySQL instance you could use, Postgres. Uh, they have DynamoDB, which I've played around with. I haven't used it so much in production applications, but definitely something that could be of use if you need like a simple key value data store. I'm using as AWS Secrets Manager to store the keys that my application uses. So AWS can really help you build anything that you need inside of your application um, without having to go to a bunch of different uh, service providers and using so many different technologies to actually meet your use case. Um, I'm using AWS for uh, it's the text analyzer, but a text strat. So they're able to provide machine learning models that if I give it a receipt or a bill, they can actually parse specific fields out of that bill to make my job easier when I'm trying to provide some document parsing services to my customers. So I say that to say there's a lot you can do with AWS where you don't have to start from scratch. They empower developers like us to just start building, and they'll handle a lot of the maintenance of that infrastructure that doesn't really distinguish your app from another app. They can do a lot of that. You can focus on just let me on building the business logic that allows your app to solve your customer's problem. Because all of these services that I mentioned, they are powerful alone, and you can do and provide really cool use cases and workflows with them. But when you put them together to actually solve your unique customers' needs, they allow you to create even more value than any of these individual solutions could do on their own. So that's something super helpful to keep in mind when if and when you decide to build with AWS. And yeah, AWS is just one solution. I know I got a buddy that he says he is all GCP. So every solution that I just described that AWS has, there is potentially more than likely a uh, a solution that GCP Google Cloud Platform also provides, as well as Azure. They all kind of have the same similar services. They're all in competition with each other, so they're all doing almost very similar things. They may have different ways of pricing the uses for that service. They may have different terms on how they describe a specific service. So a VM in AWS is an EC2 instance. In Azure, it's a VM. I think it's literally just an instance. No, it's a VM. Like they just have Azure VMs. In GCP, you can create a, I forgot what it's called, but they have very different brand names for the same technologies that you are going to need to use. So play around with all of them. If you just want to get started and build something today, AWS is a great uh, resource to use. I would recommend checking it out. If you want to learn more about it, do some trainings, get certified in AWS. It is the cloud service provider with the largest market share. And they've also been the first ones to enter the space. So that says something about what they can do and what they have been doing and what they will do in the future. So keep it up, keep it in mind.
What should I do when I depend on teammates who are not meeting expectations and blocking my work?
So this challenge is and can be very difficult to navigate because a lot of us, you don't want to feel like you are throwing someone under the bus and you don't want to be calling names and you should not be, right? You want to make sure you are uplifting your team and praising your team as much as possible. But there are going to be times where the people that you work with are not doing what they need to do. And in those instances, you have to be vocal about what it is that you expected them to do and what the disconnect is. Like, what are they actually doing? And because it could be that you're just missing something, it could be that you're not aware of some other responsibilities that they had that are causing them to not be able to work on the thing that you're asking them to do. So that could be a thing. So definitely have a conversation with the team member uh, first. Try to understand, what you're missing. Go into the conversation with some humility. Go into it with an open ear to understand and learn kind of what it is that they may need from you for them to actually deliver the results that you're expecting and asking for. If that does not work, if you're seeing that there is a consistent uh, lack of alignment on just what you both expect on what you're getting, then you have to respectfully raise this or make this available to a larger audience. I'm not saying call the VP and let them know that this person is not doing what you said for them to do. I'm saying you have to have some type of way to make it clear to everyone that this is what you need. And so you have to just say, hey, maybe it's out of the team chat. Hey, I'm looking for this. XYZ, can you help out here? And maybe call their name out or call out their team's name to make it not like you're pointing fingers at any one person. Maybe you're just trying to figure out more from that area of the business. So you can do that. You don't, as much as possible, you don't want to pick fights with anyone in particular, but you want to make it clear that you are talking about this specific group or this specific department. So that could also be a solution. But at the end of the day, you have a job to do and they have a job to do. If you feel very strongly that the job you are assigned to do, that you are responsible for, is being blocked by someone else, then you need to raise that with your boss your leader and theirs, because maybe maybe those guys aren't on the same page about the resources and the availability that you need to actually meet the goals. And maybe that needs to be a conversation that needs to be had at maybe a higher level. Um, don't stress yourself out about someone not joining some call that you were told by your manager to schedule. If they decide not to join and they're on a different team, then that becomes a issue. Yeah, that becomes. I ain't do my process today. I was supposed to put it on D&D, but that becomes an issue that they kind of have to talk more about at their level. Some other things to keep in mind is that you may sometimes find yourself asking the wrong person for some information, and the person you're asking may not even be aware enough to know to tell you that, hey, I'm not even the right person to be asking this information from. So if you if you were to if you were to if you were to figure out that the person you've asked is not the right person to be asking, then that's another conversation that needs to be had. But the answers may just not be with the person who you thought it was going to come from. So you have to focus on communication. You have to focus on making it known what you need, making it clear that this is the timeline that you need, having and setting up conversations with even related people. Like maybe you're emailing the target who you think is supposed to be the resource for it, but now you have to CC their manager or the person that works under them or people that work with them to make sure that you have clearly articulated and clearly defined what the problem is and what that scope is, and you can bring those opinions and those voices in, and they might be helpful to you. uh and that was really all we had for questions this week. um the objective of these conversations is to help prepare us for the scenarios and situations that we may likely face when we enter our roles. There to give you context and clarity, whether you're a software engineer joining a 100-person team or a startup founder, bootstrapping with yourself and maybe one other developer. They should provide you, and I'm sure they will be of value to you as you continue to develop inside of your career journey. Um, for final thoughts this week, I just wanted to think about and highlight the importance of building the community around you. And I say building the community, but I could just as easily say developing the community. The people around you and the people that you want to be in your community, they are they're there, right? You have a bunch of people around you that may be willing or likely to support the objective and the vision and the mission. Your goal is not to try to force them to do it. Your goal is to inspire them to do it and create opportunities for them to grow into the positions that you need them to be in. If they if they are interested in helping, then they will, and capable, right? Some people are they're just not they're incapable. They don't have the skills or the mindset required to actually uh approach problem solving the way that they should. Um, if that is the case, then you can't do anything with them. But for those that want to help, you have to help them by developing them. You have to give them tasks. You have to give them more clarity around the context of the task that you're asking them to do. It's not going to be like you just get this A team out of nowhere. A teams don't just become A teams. They have to train, they have to be developed, they have to be organized by an A trainer, by an A coach. So if you're looking to build your community, that means you need to start with coaching them. You need to start with seeing how you can make them better, how you can support them, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, because that's your responsibility to your community, especially if you want that community to be more valuable to you and to the world as a whole. Um, so just keep that in mind. What can you do this week and or even today to help build better people around you and to support them? Because they're with you. You just need to figure out how to use them and not misuse them. Use them. So with that being said, thank you everyone for joining this conversation. Uh, Again, let me know what you like. Let me know what you disagree with. Let me know what you would like to hear next week. And good luck in your journey. You know, builders keep building. Peace out.